Sports Minutes with Zia-ul, Raushan.
Money FM 89.3. It's time for Sports Minutes with me, Zia-ul, Raushan. Now, a few things are certain in life. Deepan dishing out more scoops than Ben & Jerry's, local teams struggling to keep clean sheets, and a refereeing decision or two that leaves us gobsmacked.
Oh, that's got to be a goal, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got to be a goal. You can
Surely
really,
they have to look at that again.
Yep, as the comms team requested, we are going to look at that incident in detail. Deepan, you ready?
Of course, I think as always, every week we have referee's decision to talk about, and this week is the same.
Yep, let me get you up to speed with that decision we are speaking of in case you haven't watched it. Geylang International let a 2-goal lead slip to draw 2-2 against BG Pathum on Sunday. And unsurprisingly, it was Doi who dominated the headlines. A quick-fire double in the first half, followed by that failed Panenka penalty, capped an eventful 45 minutes for the man who's closing in on Mirko Grabovac's all-time season goal record. And just when he thought he'd sealed his hat-trick in the 70th minute, a perfectly legitimate goal was ruled out. Deepan, make sense of it for us, please. Any idea why this happened?
Yeah, to answer your question directly, I have no idea, but I'll try to analyze and explain. So I think first and foremost, we've got to see whether it was an offside call that was made. So if I remember correctly, I don't think the on-field decision was to disallow the goal for offside. It seemed the case of that the ball did not cross the line. I think that's what the on-field decision was. So if you're going to use VAR to say that it was offside, it has to be clear and obvious, correct? And replays suggested that it was not clear and obvious that it was offside. In fact, it was the opposite. It seemed that Tomoyuki Doi was played onside on the far side. So we move on to whether the ball crossed the line or not. On-field decision is that the ball did not cross the line, and I agree. I mean, in terms of the referee being there, maybe in his position, it's not easiest of calls to make. Maybe he was blocked by certain players or whatnot. So then it goes to VAR and camera angles. I've seen the replay a few times. I watched the match in real time, and I've not seen a replay since that suggests that the ball did not cross the line. So then, I mean, VAR is supposed to be clear and obvious decisions. To me, it's clear and obvious enough that the ball did cross the line. The only thing that maybe the referee department will say is it is not clear in the picture where the ball is. So the ball is either not crossed the line or has crossed the line. And yes, in the replays that you can't see where the ball is because the goalkeeper has covered it. But the goalkeeper is behind the line. So therefore, the ball has to be behind the line. So the only logical explanation or ending you could come up with here is that the ball has crossed the line. And if you are the referee seeing this footage, surely the decision that you sort of tell the referee on the field is, look, I think the ball has crossed the line. Would you want to come over to the pitch side monitor and make a decision, a more informed decision for yourself? So that's the very least that should have happened. The referee, or rather the VAR, telling the referee to come and have a look. We had none of that. They decided it wasn't a goal. And I said this before last week or the week before. Sometimes decisions don't go the way of a certain team. For example, BG Pathum against Tanjung Pagar United, where they were denied a stonewall penalty, but they won the game in the end. Here, the game ended in a draw. Who knows if that goal had stood, Geylang go on to win all 3 points. And now Geylang look in a precarious position where they might not qualify from the group. So a lot of these decisions now are affecting what happens to a team and their predicament in the season. Because if this season ends with maybe Geylang finishing third, not making it to the Singapore Cup semi-finals, it's not a great season, right? But what if they make the semi-finals because of this win? So a lot of these things are very important. You know, we talk about it week on week. We give it the play that we give it because it is important. You know, we cannot just talk about decisions when, you know, it's something that doesn't lead to anything important. We've got to talk about every decision. And if we are talking about refereeing decisions each week, then it's clear as day. Refereeing in Singapore is just not good enough.
Yeah, you're absolutely right to point out the bigger picture, the issues that this might cause for Geylang International. Just zooming in back on the incident, right? There are two schools of thought here. The decision was to stick with the on-field decision. So they've disallowed the goal for two reasons possibly. Ball not crossing the line or Tomoyuki Doi was offside. Why aren't we using technology? These two decisions I'm speaking of are black or white. It's not interpretation decisions. So why then are we not using technology? Why is VAR not drawing the line to confirm if Doi was onside or offside? Why is there no goal line technology to tell us if the ball crossed the line or not?
Yeah, so I don't think that technology has been sort of made available in Singapore or bought by our league. But the truth is this, VAR was not implemented this season. It was not implemented last season. It's been a few seasons now and we've got to get better at this. You know, we can't just say, you know, these are teething issues. We'll be left with no teeth. I think at the moment, a lot of these issues are things that can be improved. And the problem is that week on week, we don't see an improvement. We don't see an attempt to get better at this. We see the same old decisions that are being made, same old kind of problems that are being drawn. So again, this really goes back to the administration. What are you doing to clarify some of these decisions? Again, what stops you from coming out with a website post, with a statement by the referees department to say, hey, you know what, we address these issues that have happened in the last few weeks. We are working on this, or working on B, or working on C. We have that in the EPL, don't we, with Howard Webb coming to explain those decisions. Have someone stand behind these decisions. The last thing you can do is to ignore these things. And I'm sure, Raushan, let's not kid ourselves, they do listen to the podcast. I'm sure. I mean, we are the only ones who talk about Singapore football week on, week out anyway. They've got to do something to be more transparent to fans, to talk to the fans directly. Forget us. We are nobodies. The fans are the ones who are important, and they have to sort of suffer these decisions week in, week out, whether you're a Geylang fan or not. If you're a football fan, you will just feel this is unjust. They've got to do better, and they've got to be more transparent about it.
No, you're absolutely right. The accountability is lacking, and I've long said this. It's not just the accountability, it's the education as well. Me and you don't know it all. The fans don't know it all. It's an opportunity to educate the fans on the nuances of the rules so everybody can get better together, right? I want to ask you this. You talk about the administration. We know plenty needs to be done to resurrect Singapore football. Where does improving or raising the standards of officiating lie in that priority list?
Yeah, I think it's quite high up. And I say this, so a lot of people, when they talk about refereeing decisions, they think it's just about the disallowing or the allowing of the goals, the offside decisions and whatnot. I think there's one more key factor here that has to be addressed, and that's the stoppage in play in games and the lack of adding on the stoppage time minutes. A lot of SPL games, especially this season, they are very stop-start. And the referees have a very big part to play here, because I think they blow up too unnecessarily sometimes, and they don't add up the minutes later. Again, I'm not privy to the stats here. I think Eddie Hirono from the Lion City Sailors fan group has sort of done a piece on this before about how much of the ball is in play. But I'm very sure when you look at the numbers this season, it'll be very low, very, very low. And the referees have a part to play. And this goes back to the quality of the league. If it's very stop-start, then how do you raise the intensity of the league? So all these things matter. You can't just say that, quality of the league is dependent on the quality of players that you bring in. No, it's not just about that. It's about how you officiate a game. It's about whether these referees are experienced enough, whether they let a game flow. All these things are standards of officiating in Singapore. And right now, it is low, and we've got to do something about it.
Sports Minutes is still working on getting that referee's representative in the hot seat to try and understand these incidences a bit better. But let's move it on to the football, because I assure you VAR will come up on next Monday's podcast as well. In terms of football, you talk about Geylang now in a very precarious position of not progressing from the group. How frustrated will Coach Mohammad Noor Ali be?
Oh, very frustrated, especially because they held a 2-goal lead. Time and again, I think they give up leads too easily. I thought they missed Sakuma in this game. Sometimes they are a bit too over-reliant on Tomoyuki Doi, I think it has to be said. I mean, you look at it's no secret, right? The number of goals he scored, the number of goals that Geylang have through him. I think they've just got to, in a sense, diversify the attacking options. Bezakor clearly is a miss for them. So, it sometimes is easy to sort of slam Geylang when they don't have the full complement of players available. And we've talked about this week in, week out, that they need that first 11 to win games. But I thought overall, they held their own in this one. We have to say that this BG Patum team, it seemed like 11 players looking for match fitness. And then some. So maybe it was easier for Geylang than what we expected it to be. But I think Geylang have to do better till the season ends. The opportunity is there for them, I think finishing the top 3 is more or less guaranteed. But can they sort of finish above their eastern rivals? It's a very big carrot, Raushan, to have their bragging rights. Can they do it? I think they can, but their form has to improve.
Time will tell how Geylang push on from here. Just very quickly on that Panenka penalty which Doi decided to unleash at the end of the first half. Where do you stand on it? I understand he's since apologized to his team and teammates, which I think he should, but where do you stand on it? Should he have done that?
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, I'm all for Panenkas. I like to see them go in, but not when your team is not winning the game. I mean, even if your team is winning the game by 1 goal margin, I'm still not sure if you should do it. Not when your team is not winning the game for sure, yep.
I don't know. I feel like it was worth an effort. It's unlucky that he didn't go in, but anyway, he's still a wonderful marksman, right?
I think if it proves to be the difference between your team progressing to the semi-finals or not, then that makes it clear whether he should have done it or not.
Yeah, speaking of missed penalties, Doi wasn't the only one who missed a penalty in that game. Iksan Fandi stepped off the bench, joined the fray. His team won a penalty and then he ballooned that penalty. He looks bereft of confidence, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think confidence is very, very important for any footballer, let alone a striker. And I think Iksan in this game, he looked very rusty, I think is the word to use here. And of course, I think it's not a surprise. You look at his stats this season, number of games he's played, very low. And of course, when you come into a plastic pitch, something that he's not used to back in Thailand, and then coming back to play on that ground, of course, there's also a bit of nervousness on his part and even Ilhan's part, right? Because they have been injured here before. So I think all those things played on his mind, in terms of getting a goal. Would have been his priority, but wasn't able to do it. But from a Singaporean football fan's perspective, I just feel him and Ilhan look just a bit off the ball, and it's an important month coming up in terms of Asian Cup qualifiers. You compare them to, say, a Shawal Anwar at the moment, who is firing on all cylinders, looks ready to play that pressing game. Right now, Iksan is, let's not even talk about whether he's ready to play a pressing game. Is he ready to even start or finish games at the moment? I think that's a big worry, and it all comes down to game time, and he's not getting the game time right now at BG Pattun because he's building up his fitness. A fully fit Iksan is a problem for any defense in Southeast Asia, don't get me wrong, but as long as he's not fully match fit, it is a problem.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think the listeners will agree that we want nothing more than a fully fit Iksan and Ilhan because we know the value they can bring. But based on current evidence, based on the eye test on Sunday's game, as well as looking ahead to the March qualifiers, it's my opinion that Iksan and Ilhan have slightly lost their way. How concerning is that as a Singapore football fan, especially when you consider the games we have in March?
Yeah, so I wouldn't go as far as to say they've lost their way. I think it's more a case of just being unlucky with injuries. I think injuries are people have to know this is not something that you can control. Sometimes you work all week or all month to sort of regain that fitness and to be fully fit for a football match, but it doesn't work out that way because once you get back on the training page and you just run a bit and then you feel that same old niggling injury again, I think it's a very difficult position to be in. I don't envy both of them. I think Ilhan is in a better place. I think he's played more games. It's just that he's not starting week in, week out. But again, it goes back to, decision making. Was this the best club for Ilhan at this point of time? Is a question worth asking. But you are right. Important month ahead, Asian Cup qualifiers, and between now and then, I would hope, I pray that they both get more game time because on their day, fantastic players, shoe in for the first team if they are fit. But if they're not fit, they're not going to help our cause.
Yeah, time will tell whether Ogura decides to even include them in the squad or not. Sports Minutes, as you know, will keep abreast of that information. 3 other games in the Cup this past weekend. Brunei DPMM with a much-needed 2-0 victory over 10-men Young Lions. BG Tampines Rovers beating Albrechts Niigata 2-1. And then the Lion City Sailors trouncing Tanjong Pagar 4-1. What stood out for you in terms of those 3 games? Yeah,
I hate to go back to it, but Lion City Sailors, I thought, despite fielding, I won't call it a B team because they still had quite important players on the pitch there, but sort of resting their really key players and still being able to be heads and shoulders above Tanjong Pagar, I thought that's worth commending. But more importantly, I thought what was great was 3 players who don't normally get a lot of game time sort of being a standout here in some aspects. So first and foremost, Anu, I thought he was fantastic again. A lot of people talk about how he's a midfield destroyer, but he created a lot of chances for Sailors in this game. 3 over-the-top balls that really should have all resulted in goals. I think only one of them resulted in goal in the end, and that was Akram's goal. And also, Akram, I think he did well here against his former side. He shows that he can be an option for the Lion City Sailors. And I also liked Rasak coming off the bench to score. And if people watch the highlights, they'll know that Nathan Mao assisted the goal. So nice to see someone who has been deemed not good enough for the Singapore age group team, playing a decisive pass in the Singapore Cup match. And I also hear that Nathan Mao actually had spent a few weeks in England with a particular team, trialing or training, whatever you want to call it. And I heard he impressed as well. So again, I think this is good signs for the Lion City Sailors with the youth players coming in to really do well.
Alright, so the reason we skimmed through the remaining 3 Cup games is because we're going to talk about something important that broke on Friday last week, which is your scoop about Forrest Li potentially putting his name into the FAS Presidency elections. Deepan, that would be some story if he does put his name into the ring.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's something I've been working on for a few weeks now. Not always easy to get a very media-shy person to sort of comment on these things, but I found a way in the end. But yeah, I think this would be massive for Singapore football. I mean, the very fact that this is not any Tom, Dick, or Harry that we're talking about. This is guy that's known throughout Singapore for his business. And I think what really would get people sort of very hyped up is what he's done with the sailors since sailors were privatized in 2020. I think Forrest is... we all know what he is about, and I think it's really now a case of him sort of weighing up whether this is something he wants to do, something that is worth his time. Because keep this in mind, this is C group that we're talking about. It's not just some guy who has a prata shop down the road. This is someone who is the owner of one of the biggest companies in Singapore. So very tough decision to make. At this moment, I'm not very sure of what the final decision would be. If you want me to hazard a guess, I think he will go ahead and put his name down for the FAS presidency. But now the question remains is, if he does do that, then who is on his slate? Who are the vice presidents? Who are some of the important EXCO members that will be there? I think that's also important as much as Forrest Li's presidency candidacy.
All very exciting, Deepan, but obviously since the story broke, there's been plenty of chatter about conflict of interest in terms of Forrest's role with the Lion City Sailors. Could you clear that up for us in terms of how he would almost do both?
Yeah, so I think factually speaking, I think it's C Group that are the owners of the Lion City Sailors. It's not Forrest Li owning Lion City Sailors, right? Yes, he is chairman, but I believe that it's a role that he possibly will step away from if he becomes FAS president. C Group continues to own the Lion City Sailors. I mean, let's just put it this way. I think the best way to sum it up will be this, which is you look at the current FAS EXCO, there is Tava, who is the Balestier chairman, who is the vice president of the FAS. There is Ben Teng, who we know is a Geylang man. He is also one of the vice presidents. So if that is allowed, then surely this shouldn't be a problem. And just to throw in another thing is people talk about whether or not it'll be fair in terms of financial reasons, because how is the future president of the FAS also has links to the richest club in Singapore and whatnot. Again, I think the vice president of the FAS right now, Tava, is basically the treasurer of the FAS, right? Because he's in charge of finances at the FAS. So if a chairman of a SPL club like Balestier is sort of handling the finance at FAS, how is this not a conflict of interest? So I think it wouldn't be a problem. But again, it comes back to this. Who is going to be on that EXCO? It has to be sort of diversified. I think there should be chairman of other clubs so that there is no biasness or conflict of interest. Because people have to understand this. Decisions made by the FAS is not on the president alone. It has to come from the EXCO. So I think the EXCO needs to be balanced. The president can be a figurehead, as to speak. He needs to be someone who can rally Singaporeans, football clubs, and also be able to have the personality and the aura, the charisma, to have the network to really bring in the investments that Singapore football needs. Because let's be honest, it's not a thing of whether it's he said or she said or opinion of me or you, but the fact is there. How many investments or sponsors has Bernard Tan brought in? I think that's clear to see.
Yeah, the fact that you bring up the EXCO, the possible makeup of Forrest Li's EXCO suggests you're already working on your next scoop, so we'll keep a lookout for that. Do follow Deepan on Instagram or X if you like to keep abreast of that information. Deepan, we all know about what Forrest has done for the Lion City Sailors because they are the only privatized club in local football. They have the resources that are far beyond everything, all their competitors. But beyond that, beyond the Lion City Sailors, what has Forrest done for Singapore football?
Yeah, I think it goes back to as early as, I think, 2016, I believe, where Garina, of course, sees gaming arm, I believe, had invested in the Young Lions, and we saw the Young Lions being named Garina Young Lions. The investment of, I think, close to 2 million, if I'm not wrong. So it's not new. He has been around the local football scene, and also not just the local football scene, but he was also part of the sort of committee at the SNOC, which of course oversees the Singapore sports scene in terms of Olympic Games and major sports events. So he's not new to the scene at all. And I think what I really like is the fact that Singapore football for long has been seen as something that you don't really draw any revenue from. And despite that, he's put his money where his mouth is. I was one of the skeptics when the Lion City Sailors were privatized in 2020. I didn't think they would make such an impact. But let me just tell you this. I mean, we move away from what's happened on the field in terms of their impact in Asian Champions League competitions. But look at the amount of jobs that they have created, serious jobs that they have created in the Singapore football ecosystem. Not just from a marketing perspective, we see a lot of good work that is done. And just to sort of deviate from that point, I think this past week we saw this clip on social media from the Lion City Sailors almost teasing a new mascot's arrival. I had this conversation with the PR director of the English Premier League not too long ago, and she was telling me this story about how her son was a Brentford fan, even though she has allegiance to Newcastle, I believe. And that's all because there was once her son saw a Brentford mascot and just fell in love with the mascot right away, and has since become a Brentford fan, and he carries along this mascot plush toy everywhere. And for long, I always wondered, why have we stopped having mascots? Because it's such a identity thing for young people. I mean, for you and I mean, her mascot probably doesn't do much. I'm not sure about you, but at least for me. But for the young kids, for the people who want to get interested in local football, having a sort of cute, attractive mascot does wonders for you. And again, these are the kind of things that they're doing off the field because they have a proper marketing department, a proper comms department, various other things. I mean, in terms of physios, in terms of everything that they've built right there, it's all the good stuff which local people are benefiting from. And that's what we need in the FAS, where people believe in the hierarchy, the leadership, to think that, hey, the Singapore football ecosystem is something I want to get involved in, because that's what's happened at the Sailors. A lot of people want to work at the Sailors now. It's a given. So hopefully that effect is the same one we have in the FAS and Singapore football. But let's not get carried away. All this is only if he decides to run for the presidency. At the moment, they're exploring it.
I love how you brought us on that wonderful journey of expecting what to come, but caveating it with decisions that need to be made. Speaking of decisions that need to be made, there is a timeline at hand. When are we looking? When does the FAS need to hold that elections? And what is the timeline for Forrest Li to put his hand up and say, yes, I'm going to be a part of the running?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, FAS has to announce when these elections will be, and I believe it has to be held by the end of April. And then once they announce it, then we will have to play the waiting game of who collects the papers and who submits them. Will we see a contest? I'm not sure, but if I was a betting man and if Forrest Li puts his sort of name in the hat, then I think anyone with any semblance of logic in them will probably not run against him, is my belief. But let's see, weirder things have happened. But if you ask me for my thoughts now, I'll be surprised if there's a contest. I think if Forrest runs, it'll be him.
Wow, what an exciting time to be Singaporean, right? You have the general elections slated for this year. You've got the FAS elections coming along. Final question to wrap things up. You've checked your phone constantly throughout this conversation for information as well as for texts that are coming through. What has the response been from the fraternity as well as the fans in terms of Forrest Li possibly becoming the next FAS president?
Yeah, I think mostly it has been positive. If there's been any negative, it's really more so like what you addressed earlier, right? In terms of questions of bias, in terms of conflict of interest. And I think all those things will be cleared up eventually if he decides to run. But overall, it's been positive. I think let's put it this way. I think it's been so bad over the last few years and how people perceive the leadership to be. We all have our opinions on it. I think generally it is quite obvious that people don't believe in the leadership. And people always ask me this question, if not him, then who? I think we have a clear candidate here.
Yeah, absolutely. Time will tell. Forrest Li, any chance interested in Manchester United? Because that's a miserable conversation. Deepanraj, Ganesan, as ever, it's been a pleasure canvassing your opinions. Keep the scoops coming and keep us informed and entertained as we go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raushan.
Sports Minutes on Money FM 89.3.